Big ideas in small bites. This is Bite Sized, brought to you by Accenture.
Welcome to Bite Sized. I'm your host, Bella Thornley, and today we're diving deep into a topic that is close to a lot of people's hearts: inclusion and belonging. Our guest is someone who's been at the forefront of HR and culture change for the past 20 years. Welcome Mark Lomas, the Head of Culture, Talent and Communities at Lloyds of London. Since he joined Lloyds in 2022, he has been recognised as one of Hive Learning's top 75 DEI professionals in Europe. Amongst his impressive remit, Mark also leads the Dive-In Festival, a global movement in the insurance sector that champions inclusive workplaces and a real sense of belonging, where talent can truly thrive. Mark, welcome to the show. Thank you very much for joining us. It's a real pleasure to have you here. So, the words belonging and inclusion are often mentioned, especially in the sort of workplace. What do those words mean for you?
So I think for me, and you know, I'm not one of these that minds what people call it, as long as their principles and tenets are the same. And I think it is about being able to function in an environment where you're enabled to perform at your best. And that's where, you know, you feel comfortable that you can share your opinion, you can bring your expertise, you can challenge, you can offer innovation, and you're able to benefit from the diverse perspectives around you. So I think for me, that's the key. Those are the key tenets behind it. And organizations that I see do it really well. There are some things that I always observe. The individuals perform well. The teams function better, and the organizations achieve their strategic goals. So I think it is one of the fundamental underpinnings to great performance.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So I was going to say, I think there's often a misconception or misunderstanding of the real value of having a workforce that feels like they belong for the business. Often it's more of a sort of personal experience. What challenges do you see businesses having in creating that environment where people feel like they belong and they're included?
It's really interesting. I think there's long been this kind of misunderstanding that inclusion just means friendliness. You know, we're all friendly, we're all nice to each other. It's got to be a festival of congratulations all the time, and it's consensus driven. And a really inclusive environment doesn't operate like that. A really inclusive environment is when, you know, we can all contribute, even when we disagree, where dissent is not a quasi-disciplinary matter. We know we're doing that for a purpose, and that purpose is that we're trying to deliver a goal, and our focus is on that. And I think the issue with just being friendly, friendly is lovely. No, you know, I've got no problem with friendliness, but in an organizational setting, that ability to have healthy challenge and debate is absolutely critical to your culture. It's like the grit in the oyster. You need that challenge. Conflict is not a bad word. Conflict managed appropriately is great, and an inclusive environment allows that.
It's really interesting you say that, because I think there has been a real shift of people really struggling to give, you know, useful feedback or have some of that conflict, and that actually I can see has really impacted people's career and progression if you're not willing to give that feedback or to have that conversation or have that debate. Have you got any recommendations on sort of tips on how to provide that environment, or how to have, especially I guess, line managers to their teams to create that culture?
Interestingly, at Lloyds, we've worked quite a bit on that over the last year. We run the culture survey all across the market, and you know, the top things that come back, people think it's professional and inclusive, but they also think it's a very friendly environment. And one of the things we noticed at the corporation was that it was difficult to give feedback. People really struggled with that, particularly in a performance management setting. So we took the whole organization through what we called an inclusive communications training. And what that did was give people the format to have those challenging conversations, to give that challenging feedback. So where people find it difficult, or your organizational culture it's not natural in your organizational culture, then my advice is provide a framework that everybody knows about that can help you get there.
Mark, so we've been talking about obviously the importance of belonging and what that obviously means for you as well as for others. But what are some of the barriers that people might face for feeling like they belong?
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the key barriers that gets in the way is when people feel A, they don't have a voice, and B, when their voice doesn't matter. And I think organizations need to face into that. Added to that is kind of transparency. And in my experience, people don't often beat you up for having a low starting point. That's not the problem. It's what you do and how deliberate you are and how you measure that, how you listen and how you evolve and continuously improve. Now, alongside that, you have opportunities to celebrate difference and success, and all those things are important. But I think that what really fosters that sense of belonging is I have a voice. When I use it, I'm listened to, and actually the facts and the narrative and the challenges and the improvements and the successes are treated transparently.
We are obviously seeing quite a lot in the media around, I guess, to be honest, inclusion, diversity, and people's views across that, especially obviously in the UK. Do you think that's going to impact the progress that has been made, or do you think this is why it's even more important that obviously building on the success that you've already had?
Yeah, so I'm a big believer in not getting kind of distracted by the noise, right? The wind that blows one way today generally blows another way at some point. I prefer to focus on what's right for the organization I'm in and the people that work in the organization. And that's where your evidence-based approach to making the workforce more effective and people able to share their opinions and innovate and challenge. None of that changes. And the principles that sit behind really effective, whether you call it diversity, inclusion, belonging, no matter what you want to call it, the principles that sit behind that, kind of fair access to opportunities, the ability to contribute and give feedback, flexibility, being able to integrate in the organization and celebrate difference. None of these things are going away. So it doesn't really matter what you call it or what the fad is or what the trend is or what the noise is. I prefer to focus on what's important for the people that are showing up to work every day. And I think if you do that and you keep your eye on the evidence, you can't really go too far wrong.
Yeah, fundamentally, as you said, there's clear value on doing it on there. So that's the focus. It's giving value back to the colleagues, the workforce, but also as well the value you get from it from being in the business. So you joined Lloyd's of London in 2022.
Yeah.
What was your ambition when you landed? What change did you want to see? What did you want to drive in your role as the sort of head of culture, talent, and communities?
So I think there were a number of things. Lloyd's and the market had been working on culture broadly since around 2019. And we're hovering below kind of financial services benchmark. So the number one goal was let's get equivalent to or ahead of financial services benchmarks on culture. And the market sits ahead of financial services benchmarks now on 25 of 27 comparable questions, one equivalent, one below. That was kind of goal number one. Let's shift that. Goal number two is that the market had, and Lloyd's had fallen behind in terms of the diversity of the population and reflecting the workforce. And that was a key challenge, and we've solved that, and we've achieved the women in leadership target, and ethnically diverse representation is now equivalent with UK working age populations. And then the third challenge was around the talent pool. Mm-hmm. So in 2022, we really suffered from a lack of understanding, poor perception amongst early careers talent, and really a lack of interest We fast forward kind of 3 years on, having done a lot of work on outreach, collecting data to be able to tell our story, galvanizing the market to collaborate on that with organizations like the LMG and LIBA and Reach Society and SEO and other partners. And that's completely changed. So the corporation, we have about 20 or so early careers opportunities a year. We now have 7,000 applications for that. The market hires 950, or last year hired 950 apprentices and graduates. So the corporation alone is generating enough interest for a 7-to-1 ratio. Fantastically diverse from all the kind of characteristics you might want. So that's been a real change, and then that's been a key success. And then the last thing was to address Lloyd's history with transatlantic slavery, and so those were some major things for the market as a whole. And then for the corporation, it was how we embed a performance management culture, and that we've done that change over the last couple of years quite successfully.
What role do you think we should each be playing on a day-to-day basis to obviously help with that ambition and ensure that everyone is really as successful as they possibly can be in a business environment with that sense of belonging?
I think one of the things that I'm told about winning the lottery is you have to be in it to win it. Although I've been in it plenty of times and I've never won it. But I think that applies to inclusion, belonging, the culture in workplaces. It's everyone's responsibility. No matter if you're the most junior person or the most senior, we all contribute to what it feels like and how effective we are in our roles, in our teams, in our functions, etc. So it is very important that everybody sees it, and I do mean everybody sees it, as an opportunity to contribute to making their workplace better.
You mentioned earlier, obviously, you'd been looking at some of the benchmarking across industry and financial services and achieving those. What is your personal opinion on having sort of metrics or KPIs for when it comes to things like diversity versus, to your point, of actually just really embedding it and believing in it and being in it?
Yeah. So I think if you're doing the work effectively, the KPIs will show.
Mm-hmm.
What's important to you, you measure.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I think it is so important to work off an evidence base. If you've got a really great evidence base, then you know what to target. You know where issues are coming up. You know how to address them. You know where you may need to invest a little time or a little resources. So evidence-based approaches, to me, are absolutely key. And my view of leaders and managers is that you are being paid to manage people. People are infinitely diverse and different. So it is a core competence of management and leadership. And I do have a great deal of empathy for leaders nowadays. It's more complex.
Mm-hmm.
That is just the truth. And because it's more complex, you need to be more competent. And I think people should see it that way. It's a skill, it's a knowledge, it's an understanding, it's a practice, it's a way of thinking.
So we've talked about the SAID framework, giving feedback. Do you provide sort of training or support for the sort of people leaders at Lloyd's?
Yeah, so we have a variety of training that's available, whether it's on inclusive leadership or the inclusive communications training, whether it's people manager meetups, which we run kind of once a quarter on kind of key themes and things like how, you're going to have a difficult conversation. How would you approach it, etc. So we have regular touch points throughout the year, which are kind of rooted in the employee life cycle. And then, of course, we have things like engagement data, which we can cut by all kinds of levels and seniority and tenure and diversity, etc., to give us a picture of what's important to people and the pinch points that management need to think about.
You have mentioned some amazing stats and amazing achievements. Which initiative or which outcome are you most proud of?
Dive In is one particularly because it's unique. Yeah, it's absolutely unique. So I'm very proud of how Dive-In has evolved, and I think it will continue to evolve. And then I think the approach that Lloyd's took to addressing its history with transatlantic slavery, both the model approach to the research, being kind of financially independent and editorially independent, and the Inclusive Futures response, which has seen 2,509 hires last year and 24 bursary students and board talent pools created and early career talent pools created. Those two stand out in my mind as no matter what I do next, I'm not sure that I'll ever forget that.
Amazing. In sort of 5 years' time,
Yeah.
there is going to be a headline. What would you love to read, and what role would you like to have played in making that headline?
In 5 years' time, I think the headline that I would love to see is Lloyd's Market leads the way on innovation and growth globally. And some of the reasons that sit behind that are a really diverse, highly skilled talent pool.
One final question. What was the driver? So was there a instance or a collective realization that you're not getting the best out of a workforce that drove, especially things like the Dive-In Festival, getting it to that scale? Is there something that you sort of saw or others saw as well and go, we need to solve this? And what was that moment?
Yeah, I mean, that was probably long before my time and probably kicked off broadly around 2019. But Lloyd's previously always had culture as one of its strategic imperatives, and it was one of the kind of 4 pillars of the previous Lloyd's strategy. And the new CEO for Lloyd's, culture is one of his priorities. So when that's the case, and the tone is set at the very top, and there's a collective will to change and improve things, then as long as you've got the evidence and the framework to help direct that collective action, progress, as we've seen, can be quite rapid.
Thank you very much, Mark. That has been incredible to hear and also unbelievably impressive. I don't think I realised the sort of scale of what you've achieved. This was Bite Sized, and I hope you enjoyed listening. Until next time,